Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Scheich. I'm the editor at Farm Journals Pork and a member of the LPC board, and I get the privilege of working with Angie Denton at Kansas State University to help organize LPC Coffee and Collaboration, which is just an opportunity for us to get together and talk about topics that we run into in our jobs every day, and hopefully find ways to learn from each other so we can be a little bit better and hear it from a different perspective, if nothing else. And so today is a topic that we're super excited about. We're going to talk about action photography through sports, but as Molly, Shane, and I were discussing, there's a lot of application to what we do with livestock photography as well, and trying to capture animals, particularly when we're, especially like in the show ring, because you're not only wanting to capture them, but you're wanting to capture them looking right. And I really equate that to whenever I'm taking pictures of my kids in sports, like there's a lot of different angles I can get, but I'm wanting to show a certain right angle. And so I'm excited to hear what our speakers have to say today. But before I introduce them, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay Rumps to make a few quick announcements for LPC.
Good morning, and thanks, Jennifer. Just a few announcements for you all. There has been some communication go out from LPC that we are having an online auction on December 3rd, and I just wanted to flag that date for you, especially because Lindsay has donated one of her prints to that auction, so be on the lookout for that. It'll be a really cool print up for sale on December 3rd, thanks to our auction platform of Smart Auctions, but we'll start showing off some of those items that we'll be selling, and all of the funds raised for that go back to LPC and the livestock media industry to fund some of our programming and scholarships for LPC members and or students. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that we have set the date for the LPC luncheon at NCBA convention next year. Can't believe that's already here, but we are going to have that luncheon on Wednesday of NCBA. And so, as you know, this last year we had to have it as a reception due to some scheduling changes with COVID, but back in 2022, thanks to the sponsorship of NCBA, we'll be having a luncheon on that Wednesday. So registration will be opening for that soon. If you plan to be in Houston for NCBA convention, please plan to also come to our luncheon. It's a really fun event. I think we're going to do a drawdown with the tags and prize giveaways again this year too. And then last but not least, I wanted to highlight for you that LPC has some new merch. We launched it at Ag Media Summit this summer. I have one of our shirts on today. So they are available for sale on the LPC Square site that you can hop on there. These are a women's fitted baseball tee, but we also have some pocket tees that are unisex. There's some really cool campfire mugs that look like this. And then there's some vinyl stickers too. So they would make good gifts for your colleagues or just for yourself ahead of the holidays, and wanted to flag that. I'll put the link to the Square store. That's where you can also purchase your ticket for that luncheon when we do open registration for that. Other than that, Jennifer, that's all I have. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. LPC's offices will be closed next Thursday and Friday. Hope you enjoy that time with your families.
Thanks, Lindsay. Now, for those of you who might be new, I'm looking to try to see everybody's names here, but there's the chat section at the bottom. If you guys have questions as we go, don't hesitate to throw those questions into the chat. We'll make sure that our speakers get to hear those questions at the very end. So we'll kind of let them go through their presentation, but please don't hesitate to ask questions. We love that engagement. So with that, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Lindsay Kennedy, who is an assistant professor of practice in agricultural communications at Texas Tech University. She's been a longtime supporter of the Livestock Publications Council and has done some amazing things, but probably most notably has helped teach a lot of really great kids and is helping set that future generation for us in the industry. And we're so grateful for that. So she has a wonderful perspective as a teacher of photography, but she's also joined by her father-in-law, Norvelle Kennedy, who has 25 years plus experience as a sports photographer for Texas Tech University Athletics. So excited. We've seen a sneak peek of their slideshow, and it's amazing. And I can't wait to hear more about how they do what they do. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. We're excited to be here. I bet you haven't heard from many father-in-law, daughter-in-law duos on here. So we're excited to be here and share a little bit about action photography. Like Jennifer mentioned, I think action photography is an interesting photographic skill that we in agriculture don't spend a lot of time thinking about. It's something I have my students try out, and sometimes it has sports included, or sometimes it's, animals in the show ring. But there's a lot of concepts that I think are relevant that we're going to talk about today, regardless of the stage. You're going to see images from a T-ball field all the way to the national championship men's NCAA basketball game. So excited to share these techniques with you. I do want to give Norvelle an opportunity. You guys have heard from me before, but give him a chance to introduce himself a little bit and tell about his experiences in collegiate athletics.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you. Glad to be with you this morning. As said in the introduction, I'm actually in year 27 with athletics at Texas Tech University. Like many of your institutions, in our case, we are involved in 17 intercollegiate sports. We start with soccer in August, finish with baseball in July, and then have 15 other sports in between. Two flavors of basketball, men and women, 2 flavors of tennis, 4 kinds of track and field, football, and et cetera. And so, yeah, it's something I enjoy doing, have enjoyed doing, and appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this morning.
All right, so we're going to get started here. An overview of what we want to talk about. I think a lot of people have an interest in what kind of equipment are you shooting, and I'll show you that my equipment looks differently than Norvelle's, and I benefit from being able to go borrow his sometimes, but he's got an interesting closet full of camera equipment. So we'll discuss that, what it takes to get quality sports imagery, and we'll get into exposure and manual exposure settings. I think that's a huge skill set that is necessary when photographing action photography. We'll get into the concepts of focus, composition, and we'll talk a little bit about post-processing as far as what you can do in Lightroom to boost images in terms of exposure or color correction after it's all said and done. All right, so let's talk about equipment. My camera bag, a couple of years ago, transitioned to mirrorless photography. I've shot Canon since I started. Still very much love Canon. I still have my DSLR Canon camera, also so I can borrow Norvelle's his camera equipment. But the Fujifilm mirrorless system I have found really valuable for a couple of reasons. One, it's very lightweight. It's something that's easy to tote around. The DSLR setup is a lot heavier, and for good reason. It's high quality stuff. But I've been really pleased with what I've been able to do with Fujifilm. I have shot some sports with it. I do a lot of landscape stuff. That's mostly my gig, but I do enjoy action photography. Having a variety of lenses, and not too many. Honestly, I don't think you need a whole lot of lenses. You kind of need your bread and butter lens. Honestly, one of the things we'll emphasize a lot, and this is kind of the version of a 70-200 that Fujifilm has. It's a 50-140. It is a crop sensor camera, but this high-end camera or high-end lens with a 2.8 aperture is something that I think is essential in sports photography. And a lot of the images you'll see from me are shot with that specific lens. The kit lens is an 18-55. Over here, it's a 2.8, also an excellent kit lens that comes with that camera. And then I have a 10-24 wide angle. I like to carry 2 camera bodies. One I'll have on a monopod for stability, and the other I kind of use as a sidearm with a wider angle lens to catch detail shots as the action comes closer to me. So a zoom lens for the further away, and then a wide angle for stuff that's up close. I'll let Norvelle describe his setup, which is much more extensive and expensive than mine.
Very much similar to what Lindsay just talked about. But yes, my equipment is Canon. The Canon Professional. The 2 camera bodies, primary camera bodies I use now are the 1DX Mark III, which is the most recent professional mirror camera. I have not transitioned to mirrorless. And a lot of it just has to do with not so much the camera bodies, but the lenses themselves, which And I think we'll talk about that later. Between camera and lens, the glass is always the most important part of what you're doing. But the slide you're seeing now, those are typically when I'm on the sideline of a football game, I'm carrying 3 bodies, and the one you see, the 400-28 is the one on the tall one on the right side of the frame. I also will use the one on the left side of the frame, which is a 200-400.
Oops, sorry about that.
2.0. It's actually a 4.0 to a 5.6. It's it's very lightweight, but at the end of the day, that the one on the left does not produce the image quality that the one on the right does, even though the one on the right was manufactured in about 1993, back when one of the few people that actually have shot film, and some of the images we'll see today actually came from film from many, many years ago. But 2.8 lens, the lower left is the 70-200, as Lindsay just said. That is the most important and most useful, most versatile lens in the bag. Every sport I can cover with that. And then I'll always have a lens like the one on the right, which is a 17-35 wide angle. Those typically just different perspectives. But if I ever get run over on the sideline and equipment gets knocked over, you'll know that I'm not me myself personally, but my equipment's worth about $50,000 walking around on the sideline down there. So the lenses are the most important part of it.
Yeah, and I left the wrong. Some of this is my equipment I left on this slide, but yeah, he's one of the things I think that Norvelle has such a great setup, and when you're carrying this much equipment around on the sideline, especially on a collegiate football field, having the right straps and harnesses and ways to attach this stuff to you is really important. We can get into that in the questions if you guys want to know more about that, but there's lots of different, and you've tried all kinds of different, different tactics to keep that stuff attached to you. All right, so let's talk about exposure. Learning how to use manual settings, I think, is absolutely essential in action photography. I would argue that it's essential in any kind of photography skill set, but with action photography, you're testing the limits of your camera, and it really resides soundly on the fact that shutter speed has to be your top priority. If you're trying to stop the action, that part of the exposure triangle is the most important. So when you talk about exposure triangle, you've got shutter speed, ISO, and aperture. And all 3 of these things are this interchangeable triangle of how you're going to allow light into your camera. This whole photography thing is about light, regardless if you're shooting, a baseball game or cattle out in a field or landscapes or portraits or whatever. This whole thing is about light and allowing light into your camera. So when you're shooting a fast shutter speed, it's really essential that you compensate for the lack of light that's coming in, because when you shoot a fast shutter speed, you're getting that really fast, open and close. So less light is coming in from the shutter. So you're going to have to compensate with a wide open aperture and maybe a higher ISO. So the higher the ISO, the more sensitive your camera becomes to light. And I'll let Norvelle speak more to that because his camera, he can go to a high ISO and his camera can handle that. You'll notice in a high ISO situation that some cameras you'll start to get into a grainy outcome, but there's ways to handle that in post-processing. But that's just one of the the trade-offs of shooting in a faster shutter speed. So Norvelle, I'll let you kind of talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of echo what you just said, as a sports photographer, an action photographer, stopping the action is what I'm about. You can deal with that and get a more artsy craftsy kind of a blurred kind of a thing. That's not who I am. And I guess, and I've often said, I work for Texas Tech Athletics, and I'm not necessarily a storyteller. That's not my goal. I basically categorize myself as a sports portrait photographer. And so the image that you have on the screen now, I think is very much the kind of thing I prefer. Now we'll see some moments and we'll see some things that occur, but I'm looking for the individual. My rule of thumb, and I'll always say, I'm looking for eyes and numbers because that, from a publicity standpoint, which is what a lot we do from the athletics perspective, is paramount to identifying the subject of the photograph. So eyes, numbers, logos, uniform colors, that sort of thing. The photograph that you have on the screen now is from the most recent baseball season. It is actually a little less high. It doesn't have the quality that I would like, but that's a nighttime ball game against a dark background. And at some point in time, if you can only deal with what you have in front of you, and that's the condition. If it's outside at night, then you just have to adjust. But as I say, the primary thing I'm doing is stop the shutter speed. The baseball is not as sharp as I would prefer. Lindsay was asking me if that bat was actually bent, and it actually is. If you're familiar, I mean, golf clubs, baseball bats, whatever, that's the moment that's what's actually happening, is that bat is flexing, and at the moment of contact with the baseball. That's it. I'm eyes, numbers, logos, and stop the action is what I'm there for.
And I think, this last point is essential. If you're not shooting in RAW on a digital camera, you need to change your camera settings right now and shoot in RAW. A lot of cameras allow you to shoot in RAW and JPEGs. There's different reasons for that. But in order to get the quality and the ability to do post-processing, to crop, to do light adjustments, color correction, you've got to shoot in RAW to get that kind of detail in your photo. But yeah, I mean, to see how fast the shutter speed's going on this camera, you can actually see that bat flexing, which I assume this was a home run. Let's just say it was.
Okay.
Pretty sure we won that game. Yeah. But, thinking about shooting in different light situations, you go from, outdoor baseball field at night under the lights, to an indoor volleyball game where you have a whole different light setup. So normally,
yeah, and there are times and places that you can control your the parameters much more easily. This is indoor. It happens to be intercollegiate volleyball, which parenthetically, volleyball for me is the most difficult sport to photograph because of the way it's set up, because of the obstruction. You have players, you have officials, you have standards, you have nets. It is very difficult to do. But the point is, you are indoors under constant lighting, and therefore, it's easy to set your camera on manual at that point. Back up just a little. There are times that, and I agree, our goal is to go manual all the time. There are times when you can't do that. Outdoors, clouds on, clouds off, changing shadows, stadiums cast a shadow. Sometimes I will go shutter priority on my camera, because otherwise you cannot keep up with the conditions. But indoors, it's much easier to set it, get your manual settings, your light levels, and then and you go from there and shoot the game.
Got a national championship basketball game here in Norvelle. This was shot in what was there's usually football being played in this place,
yeah,
right?
This is at Bankrate Stadium, I think, whatever it is in Minneapolis. I think those stadiums change fairly regularly by their name because of their sponsorship. But yes, this was the 2019 men's national championship game, Texas Tech versus Virginia. This was the shot that I thought would be the game winner, because this, with less than 10 seconds to go, we block a shot. Our player number 32 gets fouled and turns a 1-point game into a 3-point game subsequently. And then subsequent to that, the player that's getting blocked here knocked down a 3 to take us into overtime, which we eventually lost. But if you'll notice in the background, this shot was made with the aforementioned 70 to 200 lens, 2.8, and then with some post-processing work to bring to crop and to subject. But if you'll notice at the floor, there are hundreds of photographers at these kinds of events. But we were talking earlier, what makes this important are things, the detail if you'll see the Final Four logo in the lower left-hand corner of the backboard, it brings some context to what actually happened. The Final Four logo is on the bottom of the gold standard. And if you'll look right over the top of 25's head, you'll see a gaggle of cameras there. That has to do with the broadcast, but there are cameras everywhere. You also see those cameras on the lower left with those photographers. They look like they simply have cameras on the floor. Those are all positions that are assigned and they're being triggered remotely. Those are not the cameras of the people that are sitting behind it. So those are the kind of experiences that you get.
Yeah, still hurts to relive this one. So close. All right, let's talk about focus. Focus is absolutely essential in any type of photographic setting, especially in sports, and there's all kinds of different techniques that we'll just kind of briefly discuss, but we've got a series of images here, and Norvelle, as you're talking about focus, I'll kind of run through a few of these.
Yeah, most of the time, obviously you're going to, you're setting your camera on servo to take care of the action most of the time, and that this is one, and we were talking earlier, again, if I'm a sports portraiture person, I'm less interested in the action than I am the person. I make this photograph because I was focused on this player to begin with, and then just watch him through my viewfinder, and based on the contextual clues of his body, then I can tell the ball's coming to him, and I'm going to start releasing my shutter as soon as I see his gloves start to come up. And that's the benefit of a camera like the Canon 1DX Mark III. It goes in autofocus. It goes off at about 12 frames a second. So it's you get the inherent advantage of that kind of equipment. I also say, if you see this player wearing green a lot, he's the most important player I photograph, and that's my grandson Tate. But neither here nor there. That is shot through shot through the screen behind, and you can do that with any kind of a decent telephoto lens. It doesn't have to be a $12,000 lens like I'm using. Go right to the screen, put the camera right against the screen, and you'll get it'll blur the screen out. Eyes, numbers, logos. This actual and understand, a lot of the portraits, if you manage your background, that's not a shot during the game. That's during warm up. But you know the depth of field is pretty narrow, and for the most part, you don't know if that's in the game or not. And I think those you can get a lot of good images that way as well. This is Tate's brother Reese, grandson, also. And notice this is a flag football game. The access that you have to youth sports is much better than it is to intercollegiate. So don't be shy. Walk out there. You stay out of the way, but you can get close enough to get some really good images of kids. This shot is it's softball. The field, the fences are shorter. That's with a long lens with a teleconverter over the top of the fence, high shutter speed, logos, and I'm always happy if I can read the label on the ball.
All right, so let's talk about composition. Again, these are all concepts that are important in any photographic situation, but some considerations to keep in mind when you're photographing sports. Norvelle always mentions eyes and numbers, marks and logos. Even if you're photographing your kid playing t-ball, those things matter. It's the team they're associated with. It's kind of a moment in time. Maybe they play on different teams throughout their t-ball career or baseball or whatever. But getting those kind of symbols in the image really matters. And so we'll talk about how you can frame up some different things to make sure that this works out okay. Norvelle, do you want to talk about?
No, I mean, again, just echoing what you're saying, that the logo or the brand across the tape, the top of the volleyball net, that gives context to where you are and what you're doing. So,
all right.
This photograph is from, pretty easy to tell, it's from the 2014 NCAA baseball tournament. This is important because Texas Tech had never played in the NCAA finals in Omaha. This was the super regional in Lubbock, Texas Tech versus College of Charleston. And this is at the tail end of a very unexpected play. And you can tell by the reaction by the player. And this was like a lot of things in this sort of thing. Some of it's luck. I happened to be in the first base photo well. The ball was hit into right center field. I was fortunate enough to be able to pick up the fielder as he came across, and this is the tail end of about 8 or 9 frames. This play was the one that sealed the deal basically for us to make our first trip to Omaha. It's the again, eyes, numbers, logos, and the banner in the back. Again, this is just pure luck, but that gives context to when and where and what, much less the expressions on the players' faces. This photograph is one of the few that I still use that was shot on film. 2002, Texas Tech versus Texas A&M University. This is at the tail end of an 89-yard punt return by Wes Welker. And if you're familiar with Texas A&M, they're passing in front of the Corps of Cadets in the student side. I shot this from the west side because time of day, sun was over my shoulder, and I happened to have a short enough lens to simply shoot this photograph as he passed in front of the section. Again, it was film. I didn't know I had this photograph for about 3 days until we got the film back from the lab. And somehow the young man who is the focal point of the photograph appeared, a Texas Tech fan, appeared in the student section at a moment of maximum pain for the A&M fans. This is the second most famous photograph in the history of Texas Tech football.
Yeah, and we'll show you the first most famous one here in just a moment. But and again, to realize that this was toward the end of the film roll, which was really impressive. This is
if you recall, film came in 24 and 36 exposure packages. This and I had changed rolls of film just before this play, and he cleared the runner cleared all the other people about the 50-yard line, and this is between the 10 and 15-yard lines as he's going in, and this is frame 35 out of 36, and so sometimes you just get lucky.
And again, take a look at some people in the background. You've got all kinds of reactions, but yeah, this is a fun one.
Again, this photograph, long lens, I wouldn't say narrow depth of field, but that's the advantage of a large aperture long film lens, that you can blur out the background. You go to subject, and they put the focus marker on the camera on your subject, and then let it go, let it rip. Shooting through obstructions are not always bad. Sometimes, again, if you're going to make the photograph, you have to deal with what you have and make that photograph. I'm shooting through the net, and it doesn't really distract. This is a photograph from the 2009 Cotton Bowl, Texas Tech versus Ole Miss, at the tail end of a interception return. You just look, and you got your primary subject. He's showboating, which makes a nice photograph. Then you have the cheerleaders in the background. Again, eyes, numbers, logos. Eyes tell the story, and this was the same angle that we saw earlier with the catcher shot over the outfield fence.
This one was actually my photo. I think yours is sharper than mine. I was standing by Norvelle in this game, and whenever I go on the field with Norvelle, I always make sure I watch where he goes, because he understands, where the play is going to happen and the good place to be on the field. And that's something I think is essential, is field placement. And Norvelle has a whole chart of how he likes to roam the field and where he likes to be. But yeah, you gotta be in the right place at the right time sometimes and have the right setup. I did throw a few ag focused lens or images in here, just this was a 70 to 200 that I shot this with. This is a rope and drag branding, traditional branding out in New Mexico. And, being able to use the power of shallow depth of field and being able to zoom in on these details. Because if you've ever been in a situation like this, there's so much going on, and being able to isolate these different events can be helpful. Or shooting a little bit wider. Again, you've got somebody coming in real fast down the field, but it's all about shutter speed here to stop the action and a good exposure. Having good light in that early morning hour was really essential, but you get the detail, and that dirt kicking up really gives you an idea of how fast he's moving. There's not a whole lot of fast moving action in here, but I put this in here to show just the value of having a long lens versus also switching off to a wide angle to get some different perspective, different types of action into a photo series. All right, let's talk about post-processing real quickly here. Post-processing in Lightroom Classic. So I use Lightroom, Norvelle uses Lightroom. I rarely use Photoshop. Honestly, I rarely use it. I might use it to do a composite of long exposures at night, but generally, Lightroom is a great tool for image workflow. You're bringing your images in, you get to see, what all you have in front of you. You get to make choices on what are some of your best photos. Select those. I use the P key. That's a good way to flag images and come back to those later. But post-processing for sports photography is all about adjusting exposure. Maybe you need to, boost it up a little bit to be a little bit brighter. Noise reduction is an essential part of sports photography post-production. So if you have some graininess because you're shooting in a high ISO, you need a little bit of noise reduction, and it helps smooth out that graininess a little bit in the background, especially if you're shooting at night. Like in this image here, this was a state playoff game in Sweetwater's stadium down south of here. And, there sometimes with sports stadiums, Norvelle can speak more to this, but, in a stadium like Texas Tech, you're going to have really nice lighting. If you're in Slayton, Texas, down the road, you don't have, no offense to anybody if they're from Slayton, but not the greatest stadium lighting. It's kind of green. There's kind of a weird tint to it. And it changes throughout the day. So if you start and it's, still the sun's still up, your lighting is going to change throughout the game, and you have to adjust your camera to that. But post-processing can help adjust for color. Like I said, and this image still has a little bit of a green tint to it that I would fix later on. But I had to shoot in a high shutter speed. You see the impact of this player hitting, and this is a quarterback. He was a rough and tumble guy, and he's charging in, and you can see this combination of sweat and grass and turf, exploding, and that fast shutter speed allows you to catch those types of details. Cropping is also essential, and if you're not shooting in RAW, you can't crop. I'll show you kind of the difference here. These are two separate photos, but both of these photos were shot in a horizontal orientation. And it's nice to have a little bit of both, but with a similar photo from this series, as the runner was coming toward me, I cropped just to include him. And so you can see, from a story perspective, you get these other players out of focus, but it tells you, hey, this guy's about to run through that. But sometimes you just need a photo where you see his eyes, you see his focus, you see where he's headed, but you don't have the distraction of other elements in the image.
Yeah, just exactly all elements she was just talking about, it brings to focus, because that's the guy that I'm interested in, and so that's what we end up with.
Yeah.
One of the things, if you recognize Pat Mahomes, who his very, very recent performance notwithstanding, arguably the best football player in the world at the moment. This is a photograph when he played for us, and eyes, numbers, logos, and read the label on the ball.
And this image was cropped down.
Yes,
you could see other players, but
that's the thing. For most of the things that we do in athletics, everything is shot in the horizontal because that fits social media, which is extraordinarily important for everyone, much less an intercollegiate athletics program. But a raw frame do a little work in the post processing, and it gets something you might could use.
And by cropping this down to vertical, now you have an image that might work in, you know, the press guide or some sort of media use later on. So yeah, cropping is essential, and it is something that I think you should keep in mind, especially if you don't quite have, you know, if you're not carrying a 400 millimeter lens out there, that's all right. A 70-200 shot in RAW with a good exposure and a good focus, you can crop down and get a really quality photograph from sports. All right, so let's talk about details, understanding the game. We're sports junkies. You know, we understand a lot of times where the play is happening. And so I think that really comes into play as you're starting to consider, where do you need to be if you're photographing t-ball, if you're photographing flag football, maybe you're on the basketball court, whatever it is that you're doing, you understand that in a livestock arena, you know where the action's coming. And so that really dictates where you're setting up. Norvelle, I'll let you explain this photo a little bit, but we'll talk more about the detail shots.
This was a photograph. It was an afternoon game, but it was cloudy, overcast, and damp. And I was on the opposite end of the field, so I'm probably 120 yards away from our masked rider, who is the symbol of athletics. And the horse starts on one end and runs all the way to the other end, and the team follows on behind. But I could tell, based on the conditions and the fact that they were going to release smoke when the team ran on, because they released the smoke and it just hung in the air. It didn't go anywhere. I could not see the horse and rider behind the smoke. But because I knew what was going to happen, I knew that horse and rider were going to appear. And so when the music starts and you can just tell, because you know what happens, I just sat down on the shutter and released it. And sure enough, the masked rider ran into the image and ended up with that particular shot. This photograph is the most famous photograph in the history of Texas Tech. This is November 1, 2008, number 1 University of Texas playing number 7 Texas Tech. College ESPN College Game Day was on campus for that day. We had led the game all the way through until a minute and a half to go, and then Texas scored the go-ahead touchdown by 2 points, I believe, on the end opposite where I'm standing. In fact, I was on the opposite end when they scored. And understanding what was likely to happen, I said, well, if anything good happens for us, it's going to happen on the north end of the field. So I walked to behind the Texas bench and set up on this side. And it was, as it turned out, it was important because you have to know, again, knowing the game, knowing the sport, knowing your team and their tendencies. Most football teams, and we certainly are one of those, have right-handed quarterbacks. Right-handed quarterbacks prefer to throw to their right side. This is Michael Crabtree, who is the 2-time award winner for best wide receiver in college football. He was lined up on the right side as well. Snapped the ball with 8 seconds to go in the game, and because we were down by less than 3, the idea was if we could get close enough to kick a field goal, we could still win. The ball was thrown. This is frame about 9 of this string, because the ball was thrown. He caught the ball on the 9, and everyone expected him to step out of bounds to attempt a field goal. Those 2 guys, number 12 and number 3, expected him to step out of bounds. What he did, he turned up and then crossed the goal line to score the winning touchdown. And he's looking. His eyes, if you can tell his eyes, he's looking up. He's watching himself cross the goal line on the big TV screen in the stadium. And we went on to win the game. And this, as I say, we have reprinted this photograph tens of thousands of times for different reasons, but that one certainly is the signature from my career.
And unfortunately, we haven't had one of these moments since.
Nope.
So it's been a few years, but yeah, absolutely, thrilling. I was at this game, and when you have a powerful image like this, it makes you feel something. And we've got lots of different types of things that signify the pageantry of athletics, and I know not all of you can get on the field in a collegiate setting, but you look at the story, and I don't want to speak for you, Norvelle,
No, you go ahead.
We're going to run through a couple of these real quickly, but here you've got our track coach, you know, and that he's out of focus, but he's cheering on your subject there who is about to do something extraordinary. And those elements, those details that surround a photograph can tell a significant story. You know, and we were laughing about this earlier that, you know, Norvelle had to explain to the team how to cut down a net because like, hey, make sure you look at the camera, you know, and those things like anticipating those big moments are important.
Grandson, I love this photograph because it's just the unfettered joy of coming down the third base line and scoring a run in a T-ball game. But yeah, a big photograph for us. And,
you know, we have this transition between collegiate sports and then, you know, little kids playing flag football or T-ball. And to signify that, you know, you don't have to have $50,000 in photography equipment to do this. I shot, actually, this is Norville's. I've got some of Graham in here as well, but be on the lookout for these really important details. This was my son's very first at bat and hit ever in any kind of organized sports. That also happens to be my husband there on the first baseline, congratulating him. And, you know, that becomes the most important photo of that game because of what it represents personally. So don't just get so concentrated on the action that you miss these moments. Again, looking for logos and marks of things that provide context. You've got the Idalou, which is our hometown. You've got that in the background to give you some context of what's there. You know, and again, you would have thought he just won the World Series, but this was his first game. And, you know, you just make sure you're going to, when you go photograph your kid playing sports, you're only focused on your kid, right? So be looking for these moments. And it's easy. And I know I'm a parent and your job isn't just to photograph a game. You've got a lot going on, but don't miss out on the things that are happening before and after the whistle or the end of the game, because there's so much that tells the story of what's happening around you. Again, you know, I was able to get in just inside the fence and kind of sit down, and, you know, most of you, if you've got a 70 to 200 lens, you know, set it up on a fast shutter speed and let it rip, and you'll get these fun moments like this. But you'll suddenly become very popular in your hometown too. And I don't hire out to shoot other kids' sports teams. I'm just there to shoot my own. But looking for those details, you know, you go from those really high-paced college moments to, you know, he's running the bases, but these kids don't really know what's going on. And again, that also tells the story as well. I do want to speak real quickly to some things that you can focus on in Lightroom. This is the develop panel in Lightroom, if you're familiar with it. These specific elements like adjusting color, right here, you have temperature. Sometimes those things can really make a huge difference. You can create presets to make your workflow go more quickly. I've made presets before called first half and second half because the light changes so much. So, you know, doing exposure, contrast, highlights and shadows, man, that can make a huge difference in the quality of your images. So at this point, I'd like to wrap up. You can find us on Instagram if you want to follow us. Norvelle's got some great photos up, but would be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you guys so much. That was so wonderful. I can't believe our time went by so fast. It was really fun to see all those. Okay, I'm looking in the chat. Does anybody have any questions?
Happy to answer questions about equipment, settings, anything like that. We must have done really, really good. All right, we do have a question. Great.
Molly, you can just ask it.
Question is high shutter speed. My absolute minimum on shutter speed is 1/500, and that is that's again stopping action. That is non-negotiable. It may be an image that's terribly grainy or underexposed, whatever. But that's non-negotiable. If the thing of it is, most of the time with the advancement of a camera body, we talked about how important the lens is, which it is, but the average camera body that people are using now, it has enough processing capacity that in most instances you can get a minimum of 1/500, if not 1,000, 1,000 or better. Outdoors, if you've got plenty of light, sky's the limit. I like to shoot it. If I don't get too narrow on the depth of field, I'll be 1/3,000th, 1/4,000th of a second, because it stops the action for me.
Next question is about the mirrorless cameras. So my camera setup, and I can go to this slide. If you're interested in mirrorless, I could talk a lot about this, and please email me. It's lindsay.kennedy@ttu.edu. I should have put that up as well, but please reach out. I'm happy to answer questions about it. I'm about 2 years into the mirrorless game. The XT3 is about a step below the H1. And there are definitely better and faster models out there. The question about shutter speed, so when you shoot sports, you want to put your camera in that high shutter release mode, and most cameras will have that. Now, that's not saying you're not shooting manual. That's going to be a different menu setting. You're going to still shoot in manual settings, but you can change the mode to where you're shooting in, like when you push that camera or that shutter down, it's rapid fire. What I've noticed with my cameras, in the mirrorless, for what I do, flag football, t-ball, that's been great. Like, I don't feel like I have any drop off. Now, would I shoot these for what Norvelle does with collegiate athletics? I have shot that H1 during a Texas Tech football game, but there's nothing that compares to what he's got in the 1DX Mark II, as far as shutter speed. I mean, how many frames a second do you have on that?
It'll go off on autofocus. It'll go off on about 12 frames a second. If you can go to manual focus, which I do, there are times when you know where the action is going to occur, like someone jumping over a hurdle, when and where the action will occur. So a lot of times I'll simply put on manual focus and on the hurdle and wait for the runner to jump through it. But yeah, that's and the thing of it is that I'll tell Lindsay's class when I talk to them, a lot of the features that these my high-end professional cameras have are really, really similar to what a consumer camera will be. The difference is my body is metal and sealed against elements, where a consumer camera is not. But you can get really close. If you have good glass, your body will go a long way to evening the field.
Yeah, so mirrorless, I know the Canon R came out recently. A colleague of mine has the R5 and the R6, outstanding camera. Mirrorless is starting to catch up. If you're on the fence of getting a new camera, I would highly recommend considering those. It does change. Like, if you've already got a whole lens lineup on a different DSLR body, that certainly comes into play. Next question is about staying at f2.8. That's a good question. I mean, personally, I enjoy that bokeh effect that you get, when you're shooting with a shallow depth of field. F2.8, especially if you're shooting in a livestock arena, that allows so much more light to come in. That it's almost like, if you're going to get a 70-200, you absolutely need to make sure you've got it at the f2.8. There's a considerable price drop if you go to the 4.0, but the 2.8 makes a huge difference. I shoot a lot at f2.8, and I just kind of leave it on there. I'm going to find some images that maybe, I would assume that just at the
yeah, and the difference, the difference, and I agree with everything you say. In a completely static world, 2.8, blow out the background, don't worry about it. The reality is, in action, is that you are moving from the pitcher to the shortstop to the outfielder back to the catcher. And so you're going to I need more depth of field in some of those issues. So I'm going to hit more of the mid-range. If I'm really interested in somebody making a play, I'm more in the 5.6 to range, because that seems to be the sweet spot on most lenses. So that's why, according to what are you trying to do? What's the application?
Yeah. And with an image like this, if you're at too shallow of a depth of field, now you're going to have different players that are out of focus. Right. And so with a 5.6 or something a little bit higher, then you get more players in focus. And that's where, having a little bit higher of an ISO allows you to get the light that you need in a situation like this. Multiple camera straps. I'll tell you real quickly what I have, and then I'll let Norvelle, you're gonna have to take a picture of all of that. And I mean, he's got all kinds of like military tactical gear with loops that you can attach to. He carries 3 camera bodies at once, and I don't know if I could last through an entire game doing that. But what I have are these Peak Design straps, and I really like them for a couple of reasons. One, they have these adjustable links, and it's real easy if it's across your body to just adjust it, get it up tighter to you. So if you're out in the field, or if you're even moving around real quickly, like that's a really nice feature. It keeps that camera in place. The other thing that's really great about it is the way that it attaches to your camera. It has this system that allows for a quick release if you want to, detach that strap, or I also have a system where I can kind of see this little thing right here that goes on the bottom, like where you would attach your tripod, but it allows you to carry the camera from the base, and it kind of hangs at your hip a little bit better. So the Peak Design setup is really nice. They have a DSLR width and they have a mirrorless width. Norvelle has, I don't know how many straps you have.
Yeah, way too many. But no, I think I have adopted, based on Lindsay's experience, I have adopted the Peak Design as well. And I actually, it's according to, I have different, again, jaws specific. But yeah, I think if I were, if I'm looking for something, I'm looking at Peak because it makes a lot of sense.
I think one thing that we've mentioned it, but a monopod is essential if you're out shooting sports. Even if you just got the 70 to 200, I think that makes a big difference on stability, so that it reduces the impact of any kind of shake. It's obviously something you could do handheld, but if and monopods, Norvelle's got monopods that are, like a weightlifting bench type of, strength, but I have some that are really lightweight as well. But man, that makes a huge difference. And I use them too to shoot video if I'm out in the field. It provides a real quick way to get around and some stability to the camera.
Yeah, just exactly right. At the end of the day, you need to stabilize the first thing, which is the camera, because when you go into doing some post-processing, what little bit of shake won't meet your eye, but just on the front end. If you try to enlarge and crop, it'll show up very, very quickly. So yeah, stabilize the camera.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. Please, if you have questions, please reach out. I'm happy to answer questions and talk through some things. I do want to make sure that you understand that you can be a good sports photographer or action photographer without spending your life savings. And Norvelle has acquired those things over the last 20 to 30 years. And so putting your money into lenses, I think, is essential. Get a good camera body and then just start building your lenses from there. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, and the other thing, I hope one thing that comes through here, that the images of the 5-year-old flag football player are no less important than the people that are playing in the national championship of basketball. So as our dynamic changes and our grandchildren are getting to the point, that's much more important. And so the good news is you've got much greater access to that 5-year-old flag football player than you do to the guy in the national championship. Yeah,
you don't have to have a credential to be on the idol sideline. So again, thank you for the opportunity. Enjoyed it. Hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And, I want to just remind everybody too, really quick, December 15th is going to be our next coffee collaboration. We hope you can join us then. So have a great day, everyone. We'll make sure to get this shared on social for you to take a look at later or share with colleagues.